Perhaps you have known a mother who will do anything for her sick or troubled child. Not just one doctor's appointment and then wait, but calling back the next day and the day after that. And as the child gets worse and nobody seems to be listening, she seeks out specialists. She spends time she doesn't have sitting on hold and waiting in line, and spends money she doesn't have on medicine and treatment and travel to get to the one person who might be able to help. She will not be put off by busy professionals she is sure are missing something, who tell her it will probably resolve, or who tell her that it's behavioral and maybe question her parenting. She knows her child, and she knows in her bones that something is wrong. Perhaps you've known a parent like that. Perhaps you've been that parent, not taking no for an answer. And then, when things get worse, becoming increasingly desperate and decreasingly willing to be sent home and told not to worry because nothing can be done. That's our story today. A story of Jesus healing this child. But the healing happens at the very end. First, it's a story of the mother, her initiative, her persistence. Her daughter possessed by a demon. That's a way in the Bible of saying severely, violently ill. Perhaps she's having seizures or wild behaviors that stem from mental illness. Her mother is desperate. She will do anything. In the Gospel of Mark, this woman is described as Syrophoenician, which is geography. That means she's from that region beyond Israel. It also implies that she probably speaks Greek, and she's not a Jew, she's a Gentile. But Matthew calls her a Canaanite woman, which is a more derogatory way of saying the same thing. Canaanite was a not very nice word for non-Jews. It called to mind those who worshiped many gods, those who practiced idolatry. It was a code word for opponents of the one true God. Matthew doesn't tell us what Jesus and his followers are doing in the region of Tyre and Sidon, but it's outside the bounds of Israel in modern-day Lebanon. We can tell from the story they're not there because they want to spread the good news or offer healing to Canaanite people. And so we get this very un-Jesus-like response to this desperate woman. It says she came out and started shouting, asking Jesus to have mercy on her daughter. We don't know how, but she knows about Jesus. She knows that he can heal and cast out demons. She knows he can help her. And she knows very well that he's a Jew. More than that, she knows he's not an ordinary Jew. She calls him what his followers call him. She calls him Lord, and then she even uses that very Jewish description for the Messiah. She calls him Son of David. She shouts, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But her pleas go unanswered by Jesus. He does not answer. And then the disciples advise him to send her away. She's making a scene. "Send her away," they say to Jesus, "because she keeps shouting after us." This is usually the moment when Jesus rebukes the disciples, right? "Send away all those annoying children," they say, but Jesus says, "Let the children come to me." And just one chapter back in the story we read a couple weeks ago, the disciples tell Jesus to send the hungry crowds away so they can go somewhere and buy food. And Jesus says, "You give them something to eat," and then he shows them how to feed a multitude. But this story is different. First, Jesus ignores this desperate shouting mother. And then when the disciples tell him to send her away, he seems to try to do just that. His exact words to her are, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." I don't know about you, but to me it sounds absolutely unbelievable that Jesus would say that to anyone, but especially to one so desperate. "Sorry, but you're not my responsibility. Sorry, but I'm focused on my mission as the Messiah, and the needs in Israel are great. Helping you is beyond the scope of my mission. But she doesn't stop. He tells her that he is sent only to the people of Israel, which she knows doesn't include her, and she responds not by shouting more, but now by humbly kneeling at his feet, again calling him Lord, begging, Lord, help me. And Jesus says, it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Can this be Jesus? Literally referring to those who are not his own people as dogs? This makes us so uncomfortable that for generations, believers have tried to find ways to say Jesus didn't really say that, or he didn't mean it, or that somehow calling a dog is not a bad thing. But the Bible doesn't say he didn't mean it, and it doesn't say he was just trying to test her, and calling someone a dog was just as bad then as it is now. No, the story says he turned her down not once but twice by saying that his ministry, his help, is focused on his own people, the followers of the one true God, the lost sheep of God's people Israel. No dogs allowed. Think again of someone you know who has been desperate to get help. Desperate. Someone who has already been turned away too many times, told too many times that they're exaggerating or imagining or overreacting, told too many times that their child is beyond help, that nothing can be done, and maybe the problem is their parenting. For someone with nowhere else to turn, not taking no for an answer has become second nature. So even what sounds like an insult to her is not a deterrence. She asked once with desperate shouting, once with humble, kneeling, pleading. Twice she's turned down, and still she does not give up. Jesus says he can't take the children's food and give it to the dogs, a not very nice way of saying that he can't be spread too thin, that he's called to focus on God's people Israel, that he has come as the Messiah. But this desperate woman is also clever and quick on her feet, and she shows us that she knows something about this Jewish God and his promises. Yes, Lord, she says to Jesus, calling him Lord for the third time. Yes, it's true that the Messiah is for the children of Israel and that there isn't enough of you to go around for everyone, but crumbs would be enough. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the table. On the one hand, she says, I'm just asking for leftovers for crumbs. And on the other hand, she's calling to mind for everyone hearing this story the fullness of the biblical tradition and the teaching of God then and now, that we are chosen in order to bless all the peoples of the earth. Back to the beginning of the story, God chooses Israel not to be the only recipient of God's grace, not to be better than everyone else, but God chooses Israel to use them to shine God's love and light to all the world. In our tradition, we say we are chosen for service as well as salvation. God's special favor is meant to benefit others and not just for ourselves. She knows that. And so Jesus says to her, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. And her daughter is healed. Just another healing story, just another day at the office for Jesus, but only if you skip over these thought-provoking and for some of us troubling details. Details for the church then and now as Jesus himself is presented, realizing that the mission is without limits because God's mercy is without limits. I don't know if Jesus really said it exactly like it says, but I think the story is told this way to challenge followers then and now to rethink our own attitudes about outsiders, about those who are different, about those some are okay with calling dogs or other derogatory comments. The woman in this story is remarkable in so many ways. She knows about the traditions and the teachings of the people of Israel, and she knows they look down on people like her. But she also knows that they call Jesus Messiah, Lord, Son of David. She knows that they call themselves God's sheep and the children of Israel. And she also seems to know that in the fullness and the totality of that tradition, that their God calls them to love and care for others, that their God says all means all, that their Bible calls them to welcome the alien and the stranger and to use the blessings God gives them to bless others, even if it's only with crumbs. She knows that. And I think Matthew tells the story this way to remind his church and our church of that. To remind us that God's love and mercy, and therefore our mission to love and serve, are not just for ourselves and our own kind, but for the alien and the stranger, the foreigner, the one it is so easy to look down on or to despise or even to call a dog. And it makes me wonder who outside our closest circles knows what we say we believe as well or better than we do. What if a terrified, desperate immigrant came to you quoting what our scriptures say about how we're to treat the foreigner, the immigrant, the alien, and the stranger? Would we be able to take a step back from our political rhetoric and see a child of God? When our own friends and family, and often our fellow Christians, refer to those people as dogs, none of whom deserve even crumbs anymore, do we go along? Do we stay silent? What if people in desperate need came quoting our own Christian tradition to us when they begged for help? It used to be that such desperate people, unhoused people, immigrants, refugees, they knew they could always turn to a church. The word sanctuary literally means safe place. But over time, perhaps needy people have learned it's not really like that, that that's what Christians say, but it's not always what we do. These days, even many Christians buy into the popular idea that empathy is for wimps and liberals. But this little story seems to be put here to make Matthew's church stop and think, and to make us stop and think, by saying even Jesus had to stop and think. Stop and think about what being God's own beloved son means. Stop and think about what being saved and blessed really means. Maybe it takes someone on the outside looking in to open our eyes. Someone so desperate they would do anything. Desperate enough to walk thousands of miles carrying their children. Desperate enough to get into an obviously unsafe boat with too many people aboard. The whole world says send them away. The whole world says not my problem. The whole world says we deserve what we have and they don't deserve even crumbs. But in this story, Jesus says, think again. Think again because I did. May it be so. Amen.